Hi everyone. Today we are toasting fiction, and in honor of St. Valentine's month, right coming up there, we have with us author Ginger Bensman, and she's going to share with us the little stepping stones that she took to get to where she is, that produced a wonderful fiction book called To Swim Beneath the Earth. But let's go back in time. Like all of us, Ginger was born, but in a different place. Where's your hometown, Ginger?
Durango, Colorado.
Oh, that's why you have Colorado in your book. Yeah. Now, Durango, as I recall, is in the southeast corner.
Actually, southwest.
Southwest corner, near Mesa Verde, and not too far from Farmington, on the other side of the border, in the New Mexico side.
That's absolutely true. Good.
And you have a beautiful little stream that goes through. It's a river, I guess.
The Animas River?
Animas River, right. I was once there by way of trying to get to Mesa Verde National Park, but there was a forest fire or something that blocked our way, so I never actually made it.
No, I'm sorry.
One day.
It's beautiful.
But anyway, I lived in New Mexico, in case you guys didn't know, for a while. In Roswell, where we alienated all the aliens, be that as it may. So tell us a little bit what life was like in Durango. Most of us have not been there.
Well, when I was growing up there, it was smaller than it is right now. It was a smallish town, and I lived really close to the Animas River. And the train would go, we have a narrow gauge railroad. And so that would go by my house twice a day and blow its horn. And yes, and we had, it was a, kind of an old Western kind of themed town. And I was able to walk to school, and I lived there with a lot of relatives, so we had relatives every weekend.
The stagecoaches and horses and things like that?
Well, there were a lot of horses, but and there was a tourist stagecoach, but
saloon?
yes, there were bars called saloons.
Yeah. Okay, I do like the West, and I enjoyed that greatly and all. Now, when you went to school, were you an early on writer? Did that come later in life? What was it like writing compositions for you, let's say, when you were in intermediate or junior high school?
Well,
back then.
I suppose when I was a junior in high school, I had this amazing teacher, and she was an English teacher, and her name was Pat Johns, and she inspired the whole class to write.
Wow.
And I will always remember her, both writing and reading the classics and those kinds of things. She just really got me excited about it, and so that's sort of where it all started.
Let's share a specific classic that turned you on.
Oh, I love Charles Dickens. David Copperfield was one of my all-time favorites.
Get your kids and grandkids to read David Copperfield, and you may emerge and wind up in another Ginger Bensman.
Well,
or something thereof.
You'll love it, no matter what.
Yes. What was there about David Copperfield that remains in your mind today? What theme, what kind of narrative?
Well, there are some fabulous characters. There's, John Steerforth and Agnes, and just off the top of my head, I'm having trouble thinking of all of their specific names.
A few light years ago.
What?
A few light years ago.
It is a few light years ago, honestly, yes. But
yes.
I truly, truly love that book.
Good. Okay. And tell us about the kind of writing you initially did and liked doing. Were you into poetry or nonfiction or fiction or essays? What was your point of embarkation, to use a fancy college board word?
Oh, well, it's a lifetime work. So I have written poetry, and I've written short stories, and I spent a long time writing my novel. I wrote it while I was working, and so I just was able to do it in the off hours, in the early morning.
Now, let's ask a little bit about family influence. Were either of your parents or any of your siblings into writing a little bit?
Oh, well, my father used to tell wonderful bedtime stories, and I remember those. But I think that's pretty much. He died early in my life, and so that's pretty much it as for family.
His legacy remains.
Yes, it does.
Okay, let's mention his name so that the show is broadcast in heaven, as you know.
Oh, that's good. John Pollock.
John Pollock. Okay, good. up there in heaven? See? Footnote here.
Footnote, yes.
Okay, good. And now you mentioned your teacher there. Did any of the other students in that particular class turn out to be writers? Are you in touch with any of them, or you don't?
Well, I know that one of my dear friends actually is a journalist because of that class.
Oh, where is he journalizing? He or she?
Oh, it's she and in New Mexico.
Oh, what part?
Oh, let's say Albuquerque.
Ah, big city. By the way, Albuquerque, in case you didn't know, is the only city west of the Mississippi with a Hispanic majority. And also, a lot of the Hispanics who were born in the United States and not in Mexico differentiate themselves from as being like pure Spanish blood, as opposed to mestizo. So there's a pecking order.
How do you know all this stuff, Lee?
Because I worked as a social worker in New Mexico, and I learned that directly from the.
That's fascinating.
I know. You didn't know that other cultures have their pecking order and their discrimination traits as well?
I did know that, but I hadn't thought about
Now,
Albuquerque.
Argentina and Chile are mostly white Hispanics, and they kind of look down their noses at the mixed blood Hispanics in Peru and Bolivia and Colombia. So you have that kind of stratification as well.
That's fascinating.
So sometime, if you tune in one of our other shows, which is called Our Noble Globe, you can get some insights on that. We have one recently on Peru that can give you. Peru happens to have the largest non-Hispanic population of any South American country. I learned from Luciana, the lady who was sitting in your seat a few weeks ago.
Oh, that's really fascinating. My book is about the Incas, so I did some research with the.
Maybe you'll meet Luciana Pro Año.
That would be nice.
She's a yoga teacher, by the way.
Cool.
Okay, so at what point did you decide, Ginger, that you were ready to tackle writing a book?
Well, it wasn't really like a specific decision. I think I just I always knew that I wanted to, and I had written a part of a novel before that I didn't continue with, and then I started this one. But I always wanted to, so it wasn't like there was a moment.
So it was a dream. I have a dream.
This
is Martin Luther King week.
Yes, exactly.
So, and you realized your dream. When did you first sit down to start writing the script? This is a fiction book, and we'll ask you in a few minutes how tackling fiction differs from nonfiction as far as you know. But when did you first begin the actual writing of this book? It's called To Swim Beneath the Earth.
Well, the ideas sort of they sort of coalesced and then sort of became something solid that I could start to think about. And then I wrote sort of made a really loose outline of sort of what I was thinking about, because I didn't really want to start until I kind of knew where I was going with it. And so probably it's been 15 years ago that I started it.
Wow, okay.
So.
I hope you're taking notes out there if you yourself aspire to be an author someday. So first you begin, as Ginger did, with an outline of your concepts, a sequence of what happens when and all, and then you kind of embellish it, you fancy it up. And what was the next step for you once you got the outline?
The research. I started researching. I started researching the Inca, and there's stuff in there like fly fishing, and although I had done that with my father when I was very young, I just started trying to find out everything I could about the subject matter in the book. I researched, it's also about reincarnation, so I researched that, and I had done some, I had always had an interest in that in high school even, and so that was fun.
Did you read something early on? I think in some Indian civilizations they believe in reincarnation.
Oh, yes.
Buddhism.
Yes.
Let's go back and do a little footnote on that, how your interest in reincarnation began. Was it something you read or something you saw on television? Or?
Well, do you remember the story of Bridie Murphy?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I
haven't heard that name for years.
I think she was Irish, or purportedly she was Irish, and so it was a woman from the United States who was able to regress, I think is what they call it, and when she would regress, she would become a reincarnated Irish woman from another era, and so I was absolutely fascinated with that, and then I sort of researched reincarnation in India and how that's viewed, and so that's sort of where I started.
Good. Okay. Now, it took you 15 years to put this thing in shape. Could you tell us some of the steps along the way of your trials and tribulations?
Oh, I think, I guess I wouldn't say so much trials and tribulations. I think it's just something that I lived with and really enjoyed. It was a nice counterpart to, I was a program director for years and years for child abuse prevention programs.
Oh, really?
And so that was, that took up a certain space in my life, and then this book was able to be sort of a counterpoint to that.
I will have to introduce you to a wonderful lady named Gretchen Bennett. She used to work for Liberty House.
I know Gretchen.
You do?
I do.
And
She's
she
amazing.
was part of this. She's one of my favorite people in town here.
Well,
I
I'm
love
not
her sparkly
surprised.
girl.
She is sparkly.
Yeah. And I first met her at Liberty House, and now she's the human rights coordinator, and she kind of gave us the momentum to produce this week's wonderful refugee resettlement forum, which gathered roughly 300 people in Luke Auditorium.
That's very exciting.
So we're going to follow up with Catholic Charities and UN Association. And I'll tell the public we're even thinking of having a Mother's Day tea, refugee tea, so the refugee mothers are honored and tell the story about the difficulties, speed bumps of assimilating here in this country.
Oh, I will be one of your best viewers.
Okay, good. We may have an audience. We may use it as a fundraiser. We're still working out the early details. Okay. So tell us now a little bit about the theme of this book. Or if you, what can I read the back cover to give
Oh,
them
I would love it if you would
framework?
read the back
Okay.
cover.
This is the back cover up front. First of all, there's a quote by Kirkus Reviews, an often elegantly crafted story that explores the love between parents and their children and how people come to terms with the loss of loved ones. So if you have someone who you have loved and lost in your life, this is the book for you. I'm not specifically doing a commercial, but I'm just guiding you on your life path. And here's how it goes. Did you write your own?
I did.
The title? Okay.
I did.
This is from the mouth of Ginger and the brain of Ginger, even more important. Megan Kimsey, get that name, born and raised in a small Colorado town, as Ginger did, on the edge of the La Plata Mountains, grows up haunted by images, straddling cryptic glimpses of events that foretell her own future, and events remembered from a past in the highlines of Ecuador and Peru, more than 400 years before she was born. She must challenge her Catholic upbringing and the stigma of a mental breakdown following a childhood tragedy before she can strike out on a quest for meaning. Megan's journey leads her to South America and an expedition among the remnants of the Inca Empire, and finally to a wind-swept outcropping high atop the Cotopaxi Mountains. I hope I pronounced it right.
Cotopaxi, I think.
Cotopaxi Mountains, not my everyday term. In search of the frozen child she sees in her dreams. Okay, so tell us how you wove together the fabric that became this book.
Well, when I was in high school, I became really fascinated with a National Geographic article about a child that was sacrificed and found on a mountain called Mount El Pomo in South America. And actually, you can still you can still see pictures of him. You can look on the internet. His body is still in the museum there, carefully preserved. But he looks like he could just open his eyes and talk to you. I mean, he's so well preserved because of the dry air and the cold. And so I was fascinated by that and by how people could stand sacrificing a child. And then, so that sort of stayed with me. And then in the 1970s, when I was a young mother myself, I read an article in the newspaper about a little girl in the Midwest who froze to death on her front porch. And so those two images sort of came together for me, and that, and then with my graduate work and human development, thinking about how we have these sort of cultural scripts, and if you go outside the lines of the cultural script, if your experience does, then there's a real big effort to put you inside the lines.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3.
Okay. Girls, boys?
2 girls and a boy.
Are they all out of state?
Well, actually, one lives in Portland with her family, and my son lives here in Salem, and then I have a daughter who lives in Bethesda, Maryland.
Say hello to them. They may want to
Hello.
You can tell their names.
Oh, well, there's Jay and Jeremy and Chris.
Jay, Jeremy, and Chris. Hi out there. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Lee.
Okay, just a little plug.
So anyway.
So why don't we have you chosen a section
did.
to read?
I did.
And if you want to introduce it before you do the verbatim reading, to give us the context of what you're reading before you do the excerpt.
Well, the book is written kind of on a spine of a journey. With flashbacks, and this is a flashback that explains about my character, whose name is Megan Kimsey. It explains about her mental health her mental breakdown, her nervous breakdown. So this is out of the middle of the book, chapter 6. The chapter's called Bella. Sometimes carrying around little snatches of other times and places feels akin to having my own crystal ball. But I'm no gypsy, and I'd never wish my little windows of clairvoyance or visionary hindsight on anyone. Most glimpses catch me by surprise, and each sighting comes with its own raft of unexpected and often unpleasant consequences. It's a little like stepping onto the sidewalk in front of Woolworths and finding out that your best friend's been using your pockets for shoplifting. Besides, looking into the future mostly doesn't make sense until after it's happened. And I've learned that even small specks of understanding are burdened with a shadow side. Some shadows are so dark and sad when they wash over that they're liable to swamp your soul. That's what happened to me when I lost Bella. Mama still treats my nervous breakdown like it's a family secret, and certainly she did everything in her power to keep the details that came with it under wraps. But in a way, the whole town went right over the edge with me. I was the one, though, that ended up with my name in the newspapers, and not just the Durango Herald. My story went national to the really big presses like the Denver Post and the Chicago Sun-Times. The whole life-shattering event got pared down to a poignant little human interest story, all summed up in less than 24 lines and squeezed into a single column. The day the story appeared was the day I disappeared, and I was gone for several months. Despite Mama's overt concerns about my personal privacy, it didn't take a genius to figure out that I hadn't gone away to finishing school. Bella froze to death on New Year's Day in 1960. She died early that morning, probably hours before the sun came up. I was only 16 then, and to this day, if anyone has the nerve to bring up the way I crumbled, Mama makes it clear that the breakdown was an aberration specific to me. Mental illness doesn't run in our family, she'll say. Never has. In a strange way, Mama took possession of the tragedy. She wrapped her efficient sword of comfort around David and Dodie Cannon, managing their necessary and immediate affairs until members of Mrs. Cannon's family could navigate airline schedules and winter travel delays. Mama says it took them a day and a half to get from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania to Durango. And it was Mama standing in for me with the chief of police, who was interviewed on the 6 o'clock Albuquerque Evening News.
Wow.
Should I go on, Lee?
Do another paragraph, okay.
I remember the first time I saw the baby Isabella, all swaddled in a thin flannel blanket through the nursery window. Mr. Cannon took our 8th grade honors biology class, all 6 of us, to the hospital to meet his Bella, the day after she was born. We marched through the hospital lobby that afternoon behind our teacher, single file like a line of fledgling ducks. And when we got to the elevator door and the group clumped together, I made sure I stepped in next to Mr. Cannon. I'd been watching him from the second row of seats in our classroom all year, and I was more than keen to catalog his details close up. I latched onto every little thing, the black toes of his polished wingtips, the way the cuff of his shirt sleeve pushed beyond the arm of his tweedy sport coat, and those broad, intelligent hands. I watched him extend his finger to press the elevator button, noticed the creamy moon of his fingernail going whiter with just that measured instant of pressure.
Okay. I'm going to comment. Things that caught my eyes were the last part about even the act of pressing an elevator button, and you brought life to the way he was dressed. You deepened the appreciation of the visual.
Thank you.
I liked the analogy of the fledgling ducks working along. I go back to Donald Duck and all those things. And I've always enjoyed watching ducks waddle through the water from land to water, etc. So that's a little playful cartoon doing somersaults in my brain.
Oh, very good.
And the other part that caught me as an old newspaper man from the 1960s and thereabouts was that you made the transition from the small Durango newspaper to the larger Denver Post and the Chicago Sun-Times, I think you said, if I absorbed a little bit of that. So that shows you the expansion of how the story of the death. Now, how old was Bella when she froze to death died?
3.
3. So a very young thing, and very tragic, and the whole town was affected because I'm sure a lot of other people have been parents and gone through tragedies and other tragedies and non-tragedies with their children, and parents are supposed to protect their child allegedly from all the outside forces out there.
Very hard.
But not everything can be done with such magical precision.
True.
Mm-hmm. So, in writing this book, what did you learn about being a mother?
Well, I just learned that it's a very tender and elusive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the things you learn on the ground, though, with your own children.
Yes, yes. Well, you had 3 children. I think you said, what, 2 daughters, 1 son?
Mm-hmm.
And shall we mention a little bit about some of the adventures you had raising your children,
Well,
without spilling the beans too much?
I guess I'm not sure what to say, Leo. You'll have to lead me a little more.
I caught you off guard, okay. Anyway, I've never been a parent. I have friends who have children, but none of my own. And so, what are some of the challenges that the typical mother faces in raising her kids that non-parents never tasted?
Well, I think that there's a certain tenderness, and I don't think that I really understood how very, very much I was going to love my children until I had them in my arms. Mm-hmm. And that's really a transcendent thing. Mm-hmm. It was for me. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure parents feel different ways about their children, and of course every child you have is a little bit different, and that should be the case because they're who they are. Mm-hmm. But for me it was an amazing thing, mm-hmm. and I loved it.
Mm-hmm. In writing this book, in retrospect, what was the biggest challenge for you in putting it all together?
Well, I think sometimes you get to a point where, although you know the trajectory of the book because you have your sort of loose mm-hmm. outline, once you get into it, the details sort of demand something different than you thought. Something different than you thought where you were going
Before and after.
Yes. So there's that, and then there's the editing, and what is it they say to kill your darlings? And so there are always some parts that that
Sure,
you
love
love,
it.
especially that you have to cut out
Deprivation.
a little bit.
Okay, we have a little over 3 minutes left. Let's use some of this time to give some fruitful advice and reflection to other authors, real and future authors out there, on what they could do to prepare themselves if they want their own book, or start with articles. I should actually admit that my writing career actually began by writing letters to the editor as a teenager. And once I saw my name in print, it kind of, I wouldn't say inflamed my ego, but it did instigate a sense of purpose, that my words could carry enough weight to be shared by others. And what advice might you have for?
Well, I think for me, I think what's important, especially if you're going to write a novel or something that's going to take you a long time and you have to be involved with for a long time, I think it's important to write because you love to write. I think that has to be your primary motivation, not that you want to have written. Because I think a lot of times people start to write because they see themselves as an author and they want that finished thing, but it takes a long time to get there.
Sure.
And it takes sort of, at least for me, it was like a deep immersion thing. And so I guess I think it's important just to love what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. I would like us to touch on, well, I originally met you in the Thursday Writers Group, so any of you who are interested in writing, every Thursday, 12:30, Plaza Room of the Library, it's free. Come, bring something that you've written, or if not, just come prepared to give feedback to other writers out there of what you think and feel about their writing style. Not so much the content, but the style and how they present themselves. And finally, tell us a little bit about character development, because you write fiction, and essays like myself don't have to deal with that. So how do you work on developing a character in fiction?
Well, I guess I usually start out with the function of the character in the story, and once you start visualizing that person and the situation they're in, they sort of just emerge. It's like magical. It is very magical.
Bibbidi bobbidi boo.
Yeah, you can have some false starts, but I think there's a certain logic to it.
Agreed. And so, your love of writing emerged in what grade with that teacher?
When I was a junior in high school.
In high school. So you never know when it starts. You watching this show and seeing Ginger Bensman may inspire and inflame your passion for writing, what I call the thrill of the quill to
That's
emerge.
nicely. I like that.
The thrill of the quill to emerge. So try it, come down. There's also writers groups at Center 50 Plus if you're over 50. And that's held on Wednesday afternoons.
And Willamette Writers has a
Willamette
wonderful.
Writers. Where do they meet?
Well, I think they're still meeting on Wednesday evenings, once a month.
Good.
But Willamette Writers.
So keep that in mind. And this is Lee and
Ginger Bensman.
saying so long. Enjoy the holiday. Happy Valentine's. Bye for now.
Oh, thanks, Lee.
We managed to get through.
We did.
With
Thank
that-
you.